The backyard looked nothing like an ordinary lawn that morning. Twinkling fairy lights were strung from tree to tree, creating a soft golden glow as the evening approached. White chairs were lined neatly on either side of a handmade aisle sprinkled with rose petals, leading to a small wooden arch decorated with flowers. It wasn't a grand ballroom or a fancy banquet hall. It was better. It was personal, warm, and filled with love. Family members bustled around, adjusting tablecloths, carrying trays of food, and laughing at small mistakes that only made the moment sweeter. Children chased bubbles across the grass while the DJ tested the speakers with gentle music. The bride, radiant in her gown, peeked from the house window, her heart racing with excitement. Every detail had been carefully planned for months, and it was finally coming together. The groom, standing near the arch, nervously adjusted his tie for the 10th time. Friends teased him, reminding him that true love didn't care about straight collars. Guests chatted cheerfully, their voices blending into a soft hum of joy. It was supposed to be the perfect evening, an intimate backyard wedding filled with love and laughter. But perfection, as it often does, was about to be tested. Not everyone shared the joy of the evening. From the second-floor window of the house next door, Karen watched with narrowed eyes. She was the self-appointed watchdog of the neighborhood, the one who knew every line of the HOA handbook by heart, and she carried it around like a weapon. To Karen, rules weren't just rules, they were her power. She thrived on finding violations, a trash can left out too long, a mailbox painted the wrong shade of gray, a lawn just a little too wild. And today, a backyard wedding was the ultimate crime in her book. She muttered under her breath as she spied on the guests gathering, her arms crossed tightly. Noise, food trucks, cars parked on the street, absolute chaos. She didn't see joy or celebration. She saw an opportunity to remind everyone who was really in charge. Karen had already confronted the couple once, warning them in her sharp, nasal tone. HOA rules clearly prohibit events of this size, but her complaints were brushed off with polite smiles. That rejection stung, fueling her determination. So she picked up her phone, dialed 911, and in her most dramatic voice said, "There's an illegal wedding happening next door. Send the police immediately." The wedding had just begun to settle into its rhythm when the sharp wail of sirens cut through the air. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, music faded into silence, and all eyes turned toward the flashing red and blue lights reflecting against the garden's fairy lights. 2 patrol cars rolled to a stop outside the gate, doors opening with deliberate slowness. Guests exchanged nervous glances. Some whispered, others clutched their phones, unsure of what was happening. The groom's best man muttered, half joking, "Who invited the cops?" But his voice carried a nervous edge. Children were quickly pulled close by their parents, sensing tension in the air. Then, like a villain stepping onto a stage, Karen strutted across her lawn and into the scene. She wore a smug smile, arms folded like a queen watching her decree unfold. "Finally," she said loud enough for half the guests to hear, "someone is here to put an end to this nonsense." The officers, trying to maintain professionalism, scanned the crowd, their faces unreadable. They didn't rush, didn't speak, just observed. The atmosphere grew heavier by the second, like a storm ready to break. The wedding guests held their breath. Was the celebration already over before it had truly begun? The silence was thick enough to hear the faint hum of the fairy lights. Guests whispered anxiously, trying to piece together what was happening. The groom stepped forward, ready to defend his bride's big day, but the officers raised a hand, signaling him to wait. Karen's smug grin widened as she pointed toward the decorated arch there. An unauthorized gathering. Loud music, too many cars. Clearly a violation of our neighborhood rules. You need to shut this down immediately. Her tone dripped with satisfaction, as if justice was finally on her side. The officers didn't move. Instead, one of them spoke into his radio. "Chief, we're at the scene." A murmur rippled through the guests. "Chief? Why would the police chief be called for something so trivial?" The crowd parted as the bride stepped gracefully forward, gown flowing, eyes steady. From her small clutch, she pulled out a polished badge, holding it high for everyone to see. "I believe you're looking for me," she said calmly, her voice carrying authority. Gasps erupted. The bride, the woman Karen had been so desperate to humiliate, wasn't just a neighbor. She was the police chief. Karen froze, her smugness evaporating instantly. For the first time that evening, Karen's confidence cracked. Her mouth opened, then closed again, as if her words had been stolen by the weight of the moment. The guests, stunned seconds earlier, now erupted into applause and laughter. Some even cheered, delighted by the twist none of them had seen coming. The bride, still holding her badge with composure, smiled softly and addressed the officers. "Thank you for responding so quickly. But as you can see, this gathering is fully under control. No laws have been broken. This wedding is both lawful and official." The officers nodded respectfully. "Yes, Chief." Karen's face turned a furious shade of red. But this violates HOA rules." There are regulations," she stammered, waving her hands wildly. "HOA rules," the bride replied coolly, "don't override state law. And they certainly don't override me." The crowd chuckled, the sound cutting into Karen like salt on a wound. The groom slipped an arm around his bride, pride in his eyes. The officers, now more relaxed, accepted slices of cake offered by laughing guests. Karen, defeated and humiliated, spun on her heel and stormed back toward her house. Her reign of petty power was over, at least for tonight. Once Karen disappeared behind her door, the mood shifted instantly. Relief swept over the guests, followed by a wave of laughter and cheers that seemed to echo even louder than before. What had begun as a tense interruption had transformed into the highlight of the evening, a story no one would ever forget. The bride tucked her badge back into her clutch, her gown glittering under the fairy lights. "Now," she said warmly, "can we please get back to the part where I marry the love of my life?" The crowd clapped and whistled, and the groom kissed her hand as if to say he had never been prouder. The music resumed, sweeter than before. Guests filled their plates. Children went back to chasing bubbles, and even the officers lingered, joking that they'd never been called to a wedding reception before. One of them accepted a slice of cake. Another took a quick photo with the bride. "For the department," he claimed. As the vows were finally spoken beneath the flower-covered arch, the fairy lights seemed to shine brighter, as if the universe itself approved. Love had triumphed, laughter had returned, and nothing, not even an HOA Karen, could overshadow the joy of the day.